So Greg, why don't you come over and start the party? Wayne, Colin, and Ryan, you line up over there, and I'll buzz you in with the doorbell here. And whenever you're ready, Greg, start the party.
Yeah, it's a Spice Girls party. Since they're missing one, I'm the new one, Specky Spice. There's the bell. Hello, Wayne. Can I get you a corn chip or something? Hey, you just relax over there. Hi, Colin. Hi, how are you? Have you met Wayne? He's fighting a series of bad guys in slow motion. He thinks he's in a movie.
Very good. Close enough.
Colin, can I get you a drink? Hello.
Hey, Greg, it's okay.
Hello, Ryan.
Hey, Greg,
Hey. I guess a game of Twister's out of the question at this point. Hey, Colin, Ryan, have you met Colin? He's a trapeze artist. He's a high wire act in the circus. He thinks he's in the circus. He's a very unsuccessful.
That's right.
Which one do you acting a phone, circus performer?
And who wants their bottle? Who wants their bottle? Who was just born and is a bizarre dog-like creature?
A ball. A ball.
Have you guys seen that show? Whose Line Is It Anyway? Man, it ran from... Well, yeah, there's the revival of it, like in 2013 it started up again, but that version ran from 1998 to 2007. When I looked that up, I felt really old. I was like, oh, I remember those days. What's that?
They come once a year and do a live show.
Here?
Yeah, in Seattle, in the Moore Theater, once a year.
They do a live show. Can you let us know when that's happening? Because I will go. Oh my goodness, I have laughed so hard I cried many times watching that show. That was a good one. So, but this, as you know, this is improv, right? That they're all making it up on the spot. This is comedy improv, and it's so delightful to watch when folks and performers are in that zone of creating, as it all just happens. And then I cry because I'm laughing so hard. Just so quick-witted and surprising in the way, just what they can do. And it works because there are a few rules going on underneath, unbeknownst to many of us, at play that are happening in the midst of improv. And 2 weeks ago, we named one of those rules of improv. I want to read again what I read 2 Sundays ago. It's a quote from Tina Fey in her book, Bossy Pants, for us to hear again. I'm going to include a little bit more, so if you were here and you did hear it, then just pay attention. There's little bits in there that you didn't hear before, so it'll be totally new. But I just want to read again because I want to name this just to set us up for where we're headed again. This rule of improv that we'll hear, it beautifully captures the way in which we are all invited to live. She actually talks about 2 of them, and one of them we're going to run with. So this section in her book is called Tina Fey's Rules of Improvisation That Will Change Your Life and Reduce Belly Fat. And then it says improv will not reduce belly fat. Bummer. Okay, so listen up. Tina Fey writes, the first rule of improvisation is agree. Always agree and say yes. When you're improvising, this means you are required to agree with whatever your partner has created. So if we're improvising and I say, freeze, I have a gun, and you say, that's not a gun, it's your finger, you're pointing your finger at me, our improvised scene has ground to a halt. But if you say, freeze, I have a gun, and you say, the gun I gave you for Christmas, you bastard, then we have started a scene because we have agreed that my finger is in fact a Christmas gun. Now, obviously, in real life, you're not always going to agree with everything everyone says. But the rule of agreement reminds you to respect what your partner has created and to at least start from an open-minded place. Start with a yes and see where that takes you. As an improviser, I always find it jarring when I meet someone in real life whose first answer is no. No, we can't do that. Nope, that's not in the budget. No, I will not hold your hand for $1. What kind of way to live is that? The second rule of improvisation is not only to say yes, but yes and. You're supposed to agree and then add something of your own. If I start a scene with, I can't believe it's so hot in here, and you say, yeah, we're kind of at a standstill. But if I say, I can't believe it's so hot in here, and you say, what did you expect? We're in hell. Or if I say, I can't believe it's so hot in here, and you say, yes, this can't be good for the wax figures. Or if I say, I can't believe it's so hot in here, and you say, I told you we shouldn't have crawled into this dog's mouth, now we're getting somewhere. To me, yes and means don't be afraid to contribute. It's your responsibility to contribute. Always make sure you're adding something to the discussion. Your initiations are worthwhile. Thank you, Tina Fey. So yes and. So that piece of agreeing, that rule of agreement, but then also contributing to. Friends, these two words, isn't it just a great way to name how we're invited to live? And again, as we name before, do you hear this, how this so much aligns with the life of Jesus? The Apostle Paul, in one of his letters, he said this about Jesus. He says, with him, it was always yes. Talking about Jesus. With him, with Jesus, it was always yes. We see Jesus' orientation to all people, to nature and the earth, to the needs and longings, especially of those on the fringes of humanity, to what God was inviting him into, even the journey to an execution and death on the cross, embracing it all, as well as the new life and the resurrection on the other side. With Jesus, it was always yes, especially in the places where anyone else had said no. So 2 weeks ago, we celebrated how this is a posture that we are living here as a community here at Salt House in so many ways. We are embodying that, so many yes ands. And part of the yes and that we're living right now is actively living that journey of growing up, our hashtag adulting journey, as we've called it, 6 months spanning January until July 1st, where we're doing this work to move from being a Mission Start church, parented by Holy Spirit Lutheran Church, to launching as our own recognized Evangelical Lutheran Church in America church, and a legal nonprofit organization in Washington State as well. Again, to follow Jesus in this time and place, as we've said, is like, why are we doing all this? Well, these are the things that we have to do to structure what we do in a way that allows us to follow Jesus in this time and place. And 2 weeks ago was such a historical moment for us as a community as we got to say that yes and vote together to joining the church, to electing our first church council, calling me as a pastor. Just thank you again for that holy, holy yes that we got to say together. That was so much fun. Let's do it again. Can we just do it all that again? That'd be good. And since then, it's like, okay, right, we're done. Like, that was great. We're done, right? No, there's still, I think there's actually been more work now. Since now that we're actually official, there's all these things that can now fall into place. So much more continues, a lot of work for our council and our staff as the journey continues. And so very intentionally, we want to keep our time here on Sunday mornings paralleling that process as we hurdle towards July 1st. And so we're going to continue to parallel that adulting journey and carry us not only through July 1st, but we're starting a series that will carry us through the summer as well. And this series is exploring the endless invitations that we have to live in this posture of Jesus, that with us it will always be yes to. And then also that we would bring our contributions, our initiations, to live that posture of yes and. And so today, to launch this series of saying yes, very intentionally, this first Sunday of talking about this, the most foundational piece for us to actually begin with as people who live yes and is to talk about how we begin with saying no. I know, right? But it's a certain kind of no that we must say in order to be ready to say yes. Are you ready to explore a little bit about saying no in order to say yes? You ready for that? Okay, can we go there? Okay, so here's what I mean by that. If you would please, I invite you to close your eyes, get comfortable in your seat, roll those shoulders back, show up in this place. And I invite you to find your heartbeat, maybe putting your fingers like the side of your neck or on your wrist. I can never find that wrist spot, but the next spot I can find. And just breathe deeply and feel that heartbeat of yours for a moment, that rhythm. You can keep your fingers there. I just want to ask you a few questions, and you can just shout out answers. At what times does our heart beat the slowest? When we're doing what? Sleeping, napping, resting. What are the occasions that cause our heart to beat very quickly? Biking uphill, yeah. It's very specific and I like it. What else? Fear. Conflict, excitement, anxiety. So our heartbeat, this very kind of core rhythm of who we are, moves through these different rhythms at different times. But central to the life of God is a rhythm of rest. So the word Sabbath is the word that we use to name this rest. Sabbath means, do you know? It means to cease, to stop. Jesus demonstrates this rhythm of ceasing, of resting. We observe him. He takes time to withdraw from the crowds, to be alone, to be with his friends. He intentionally ceases and stops, so we see that rhythm in his life. And Sabbath is just one of those great themes that's woven throughout the Bible. And it's a central practice of God's people, and we see that throughout. The first verses of the entire Bible, the first words of Genesis begin with the creation story. If you're familiar with that, I'll invite Heather to come up and get ready. If you're familiar with that first creation account, God creates the world in how many days? 7 days. It's a 7-day narrative around the creation of all things. On which day did God create people? Day 6. So it says this about day 6.
So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them.
So that's day 6, created in God's image. We enter the story. And then what happens on the next day, on the day 7?
Thus the heavens and the earth were finished in all their multitude. And on the 7th day, God finished the work that he had done. And he rested on the 7th day from all the work that he had done. So God blessed the 7th day and hallowed it, because on it God rested from all the work that he had done in creation.
Thank you, Heather. So we're made with the imprint, the image of God in us on day 6, and then our first day of existence, waking up in a new world, is what? That first day is a day of rest. Notice that that's where we start. We rest with God. Rest with the one in whose image we have been made. God also made people to be fruitful and to multiply and to tend to all the animals and animals that are all over the land and tend to the land itself. But God made us to work, yes, absolutely. But God made us to rest too. That's where we start. But my friends, is this really where we start? With rest? I want to dig into Sabbath a little bit more. I wonder what associations you have or what practices you have around Sabbath, what comes to mind for you. I did a search for #Sabbath on Instagram to see what kind of pictures, what comes up. Like, what do people associate or what are their practices of Sabbath? So these are the kind of posts that came up. So there's this. It's a swing. Can you see this little swing? Oh, nice little swing at sunset. Happy Sabbath. There was this one, picking flowers at the farmer's market. Hey, farmers, yeah, we were just talking about that earlier. This next one, so many pictures. Well, this one first, just hanging out in a hammock. #Sabbath, totally. And then so many pictures of coffee, like kicking back with a cup of coffee or like brunching. There's a lot of here's my book and my coffee, like those types of things happening. Maybe when you think of Sabbath, though, you think of this. Could be. But I just wonder what comes up for you. What would you post on Instagram with #Sabbath? What are those things? But the thing about most of those, maybe not the Black Sabbath album, but the others, there's just a certain feeling to those images, like kicking back that ethereal flowers and bottomless cups of coffee kind of thing, right? And Sabbath can absolutely be those things and more as we cease in that posture, right? But in my own evolution of understanding Sabbath, there's something that we have missed. I know I have missed. Sabbath is ceasing, to stop, right? But here's the key. It's something that comes from Walter Brueggemann's book. It actually has this as its title. Here's the thing about Sabbath. Sabbath is an act of resistance. Sabbath is an act of resistance. It isn't just stopping to pour ourselves a cup of coffee. Coffee can be involved, it's okay. But it is a defiant stance against the typical expectations of our culture. Sabbath is resistance. Specifically, Brueggemann says it this way. Sabbath is an act of resistance against the tyranny of work, anxiety, and dissatisfaction. Hear that again. Sabbath is an act of resistance against the tyranny of work, anxiety, and dissatisfaction. Can you say it with me? Sabbath is an act of resistance against the tyranny of work, anxiety, and dissatisfaction. Do you feel the weight and the truth and the challenge of that statement. I had never thought of it quite this way. I wonder if you have. If you're like, totally, that's what I've always thought. Then awesome. But to put it in these words as an act of resistance, Brigman actually, he gets into how he makes the link of resisting the tyranny within our economy specifically. So it's paying attention even to the way we use our money, not only is an act of stopping, but it's actively resisting all the ways in which we are pressed upon to want more and have more and own more and use more and eat and drink more. He actually goes on to say it this way. This is kind of a dense quote, so stick with me. Uh-oh, it's really dense when it's on top of the other one. Okay, I think he's going to fix it. Dun, 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 dun. Go. Okay, so he says this. It is resistance because it is a visible insistence that our lives are not defined by the production and consumption of commodity goods. You hear that? Such an act of resistance requires enormous intentionality, right? And communal reinforcement, that's what we do with each other, amid the barrage of seductive pressures from the insatiable insistences of the market, with its intrusion into every part of our life, from the family to the national budget. Whew. Dense stuff. So again, his book is Sabbath as Resistance, Saying No to the Culture of Now. But I just find that so provocative, right? There's a whole sermon series just in this alone, right? Like we could press into that for a while, and we'll do that sometime. But for now, I just want to name that Sabbath is resistance. It is our deep need for defiance, our need for rhythms that pull us out of the tyranny of work and anxiety and dissatisfaction of all our wants for more. And so, my friends, to hear this, I wonder for you, do you know what practicing Sabbath looks like for you by this definition? How do you resist the tyranny of work and anxiety and dissatisfaction? Maybe it is time in the hammock. Maybe it is that lazy cup of coffee. But this is my first question for us to begin to just press into this morning. How do you Sabbath like that? Another way to get at the question is to look a little bit more at Sabbath and how we see it in Scripture. Shabbat for the Jewish people. Besides the creation narrative, there's so much about Sabbath that we could point to in the Old Testament, the New Testament. Again, that's a whole sermon series for another time. But looking at, if we look at the practices of the Jewish people, like the Old Testament in Israel, for the Hebrews, practicing Sabbath, Shabbat, for them was a weekly day that they took to cease, right? To stop. There were certain laws that they followed that were absolutely designed to stop working, to get them out of those cycles that they were in. But here's the thing. This was an act for them of identity. They stood out among their pagan surroundings. They were recognizable. They were distinguishable from the culture as holding the image of God on them. Just as God rested on the seventh day, so they rested, holding that image of God. As their culture buzzed around them with the usual work and distractions, they did not. Their weekly practice of doing nothing on the Sabbath gave their bodies and their spirits that renewal, the refreshment, that remembering of who they are. And in their remembering of who they are, that identity, they were actively also then resisting the tyranny of work and anxiety and dissatisfaction. So for us to ask this question of Sabbath, we see it as it was for the Jews as both. It is this resistance, but it's also remembering who we are, plugging into who we actually truly are. So what are those ways that we can cease like that? What is it for you? So again, this is that first question, just asked in a different way. What are the places and practices and people who renew you and remind you of that image of God in you? As you then let Sabbath be an act of resistance here and now. So I invite you to really actively engage in answering this question. If you have a pen, you have that bulletin insert with some space. If you have your phone, you can make a note like, I'm going to ask this question, but a few things over the next few minutes. I invite you to really try to answer this for yourself and let this be a productive time also. Even as you have it be Sabbath time, it can be productive too. So yeah, I invite you to actively name those practices of what you do now or maybe what could be. And really, this is a question that only you can answer for what Sabbath looks like for you. And the answer keeps changing as our lives change, right? So Sabbath in my life is very different now than it was like when I was in college or when I was newly married and had no children. So just it changes in the different seasons. So what does Sabbath look like in this particular season of your life? So I'm going to give a few examples of what Sabbath can be for folks in a few minutes. So that's kind of the what question. But in addition to the what question, we also hold the when question. And I want to suggest, just for practicality, there are 4 rhythms to consider for how we Sabbath. So this is a question to ask in 4 different areas. What does Sabbath look like? I'd envision that more listed out. So it's daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. And now I would encourage you to write this down, even to come back to this week too. So like, what does daily, weekly, monthly, or quarterly and yearly look like? I'm going to just rip through these pretty quick. Again, I encourage you to pay attention to see kind of what comes up for you as you think about what these things might be or what they already are, and really celebrate those. So daily. So what does daily Sabbath look like? Taking time daily can be hard, especially if you have a job and or children and or other relationships in your life. Anyone have any of those things? So, right. So, like, life is complicated. So taking time daily is hard. So I've said it before, but daily Sabbath is the 5 minutes of stillness that we find, right? It is just 5 minutes or more, obviously, if we can find that. But seriously, it is using those few minutes of privacy in the bathroom strategically, right? It is, over there. I have a friend who has an alarm on her phone. It goes off at lunchtime, so she's at work, and she gets this reminder, and so she'll pray, or she'll practice gratitude, or she'll step outside in the sunlight. She lives in California, so there's a lot more sunlight regularly. I went for her to do that, but she'll close her eyes and just breathe. She'll just take a moment to be still. So what alarm or reminder might you set with that kind of daily, we say daily knowing that we're not going to get it every day, and there's always grace in that, but we kind of say, I'm going to do this every day, knowing that it'll happen most of the time. So that's just a very quick consideration. What do daily rhythms look like? And what are those then weekly rhythms of Sabbath? Can you take a whole day of Sabbath? Can you do that? Or 2 days? I know, right? Chuckle. I know, right? So if not, what's the half day or the 2 hours? That can be something that you set aside for ceasing every week, for remembering who you are. And maybe it's ceasing from certain things, and that's what makes it a practice of Sabbath. I find that it's not always a regular time each week, but I try to find windows of time. I take Friday and Saturday off, so I'll try to find time in those days where I can do the things that are Sabbath practices for me. For me, it's going for a run, it's playing soccer, try to have coffee or a wine date with a friend or with Jason, to play with my kids with my phone not close to me at all, just really engaged in play. What are those weekly touchstone moments that draw you back to God, that draw you into resisting and to remembering who you are? So what might that look like? And again, I know life is hard, it's complicated, but again, that's why it takes intention to carve out that space. So the kind of monthly or even quarterly practices, something that's kind of more significant. Maybe there's a hike that you like to go on, getting out to see a movie, playing on a team or a sport that you're a part of, ladies' night, guys' night that can happen, serving or engaging the community in some way. That can be those Sabbath practices that are bit more monthly or quarterly, a little bit more spaced out. And then yearly, looking at the flow of the seasons, the big picture of the year. What are those rhythms that we have for vacations, for service trips, for family time, to get out and explore the world, taking time off? Staycations count too. How do we just shake up the relentless rhythms of our lives? So daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. So just thinking about those rhythms, all 4 of those areas are just great to pay attention to. But I wonder what's coming up for you as you consider those rhythms of renewal and resistance. What are you already engaged in? What are those places for you? But also, what could it be also? Here are some, I just want to make a list, and any of these could fall into those kind of daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly. But these are some practices that I know, people I know, this is Sabbath. This is what Sabbath looks like for them. These are things that they do. Swimming, painting, playing video games, cooking, traveling, sailing, baking, reading the Bible, meditating, sleeping in, praying, running, various forms of exercise in general, relaxing with friends, hiking, playing music, gardening, mowing the lawn, coaching. And maybe there's a place that restores you, like a walk or a hike that you do near your home, or a place you like to vacation, or a particular friend's home that's really just a great place to go, your favorite coffee shop or pub, or a spot on the beach that you like to go to. So again, as we consider this, I invite you to really just pay attention. What are those rhythms? What are those things that help you feel like you step out of all of the tyranny, that remind you of who you are? And as we do this, I want to just name 2 things additionally, just to consider as you press into the Sabbath conversation. The first is this, is that we need to unplug. Like just whatever Sabbath looks like, there's just so much of what keeps us looped into anxiety and work and dissatisfaction. It has to do with the tiny little computers that we willingly carry around with us all the time, right? Which are amazing and they are a gift and use them. But what a radical act of defiance to set it aside, yes? I wonder, do you actually have times in your day or in the week when you are unreachable? Do you have that? Are you always available? Because despite what our jobs and our culture and even our families may tell us, we need to have those times. And this can look different for each of us based on the actual demands that we have. Like sometimes, actually, no, I actually do need to be, people need to reach me and that there's a reason for that. Like that can be true. But what might it look like for you to unplug in some way or at certain times? I have a friend who shuts off email from Friday night until Sunday night, just like totally takes the weekend off. And I love that. Last week, I deleted the Facebook app off of my phone. Oh, it's been like a whole new world of like not looking at Facebook as much. And that's been very good for me. So maybe not for you, but that's just going to claim that as good. And it's just been a game changer. But how can you limit or shut off notifications on your phone for emails, for texts, for other apps that keeps coming at you? So how can you unplug? We need it. So just consider that in this cluster of considering Sabbath. The second thing to name as you consider all this Sabbath stuff simply is to say that we need play. We need to play. We do. So much of what Brueggemann and others are trying to get at is our desperate need for joy and play in our lives, to do something that's actually not productive just for the sake of doing it, to be present to that. I find that having kids has been such a that pulls me into that space when I let it, right? So to do that knowing it's okay if I don't actually produce anything right now. That's okay. So to be in that space. So Sabbath feeds that, and what an act of resistance, right? To make time for play. So my friends, do you see why today, when we start to name the importance of saying yes, how it actually begins with saying no? The resistance of Sabbath, this kind of no is a no that we're invited to say and to live. And then into that resistance and into that space that we create, the awareness and the unplugging and the play that happens in us, there we live into what Paul said about Jesus, right? For us too, it will always be yes. That yes and. We're ready for that when we've been saying no. So we're calling this series for the summer, I'm just going to tell you, it's Collaborate. I just really want to, windshield reflection happening. Okay, there we go. So the series for the summer is called Collaborate. Collaborate. To name how our yes and becomes the birthplace of co-laboring, laboring with, collaborating, working with, of getting into the game with God. So we're going to explore some of the yeses we're invited to say to God and to each other, at work, at home, and in our worlds, kind of all these dynamics. And today, we name how it all begins with Sabbath. Why? Because we must first stop so that we can collaborate and, of course, listen too. Yeah, indeed. So, friends, it starts today with a little stop, collaborate, and listen. So that's where we begin. So, thank you, Vanilla Ice. So to practice Sabbath as a community, we've already let you know already in 2 weeks we're not going to have church here on Memorial Day weekend. No church. Don't come here on May 27th, or do. But it felt important to let our staff and our volunteers have a day where nothing was asked or expected of them. And also just to set that weekend moment as a very potential moment for each of us to unplug, to play, to explore a possible practice of Sabbath, whether alone or with our family or with friends. To resist together. So May 27th can be our day of resistance. So that, in a sense, is your homework for that day, but really it's just an invitation to step into this practice of Sabbath in whatever way you want to explore. And if it would be a practice of Sabbath for you, we are looking for a few folks to actually be here at 10 a.m. in case anyone shows up. So we'll get some donuts. So if that would be, if you're up for it, we'll arm you with a few discussion questions. You can sit down and eat donuts and kind of talk about Sabbath with some folks if they do show up, and just have that conversation. So if you would like to help and host that and would find that life-giving, especially if you're not someone who typically helps out on a Sunday morning, we would love to set you up to do just that. So just let us know if you're interested in that. So there you have it. Friends, as we finish, I just would invite you to find that heartbeat again. So close your eyes. Find that pulse, that rhythm of your body. as we listen, as we pray. God, we thank you for all the ways in which we are made in your image, including being made for rest. Our hearts need to beat in time with yours. There are times when our heartbeat should quicken with anger at injustice. It should quicken with joy, and in all the ways that you invite us to engage actively in our world. But there are times for us to step back and out and actively resist it all too. Continue to grow us into people who say no in order to say yes. Grow us to be people who rest first. In these moments now and in the week to come, we stop, we collaborate, and listen with you now. So give us vision for what and how and when these moments of resistance might take form. So God, we rest and we abide with you now.